we're back. You missed us. You could barely live without us. It's my favorite shitty movie. It's very exciting tonight's show. We have Guy Branum on the show. He's an actor, writer, comedian. You know him from Bros. And he brought to us this movie, which I'm really surprised we didn't get to until now. Zorro the Gay Blade. And it's a movie I remember in name only, because people would always, when I was in the 80s as a kid, you know, and thing came out on VHS or whatever, people would be like, oh, you would like Zorro the Gay Blade. You should watch that. It's your kind of movie. And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. And I don't know, I just never watched it. I just would walk away from these people, go, I don't think they really know me. I don't know about this George Hamilton guy. He's weird. He gave me the weirds back in the 80s. So I never watched it. So this is the first time that I've watched it, but I know it was on cable all the time. It was on HBO all the time. So people saw it like a bunch of times, because, you know, back then you had just a few channels, and if you paid for the HBO, you watched the HBO a lot, and they played the same movies over and over and over. And in my town, there wasn't cable, but there was this like pay movie channel that came through the air. And if you didn't get a little box, you didn't pay for a little box to descramble the signal, it would just be scrambles. So, you know, I could see Zorro the Gay Blade only like for brief seconds, which I think is true about my co-host as well. What she went through to watch this movie, because it's not out there. It's on DVD, and most of the DVDs you can get are not region 1, which means you have to have a region free player if you're in the United States. But if you're in Europe, it's great. You can watch Zorro the Gay Blade on DVD there. Also on the show is our show creator, Tess Rafferty, is back, because this Zorro the Gay Blade thing came up the last time her brother Timmy and she were on the show. Hey, Timmy, happy birthday. He might have come tonight, but it's his birthday, so I guess he had better stuff to do. I don't know. I don't think so. But anyway, I should bring on my co-host, who had trouble watching this movie because, you know, I tried to get her a digital file of it, but it really didn't work. But it's nice that she's back. This is her second show back since she was off in Ireland producing a movie with Mia Jovovich from the Resident Evil movies, which I have seen like literally marathon that series 4 times. Ladies and gentlemen, Tracy Mercer.
Wow. Are you in recovery from all that evil of The Resident? No, because that's like,
I don't know why I like those movies so much, but we were talking before the show with Tess about the importance of 90 minutes. Yeah. And all those movies are 90 minutes, including the new one without Mia Jovovich, which I also enjoyed. Welcome to Raccoon City. These are fun video game movies. Why not?
You know what they are. They don't have pretension. The runtime works. Yeah, I 100%. And she's just really good at what she does. So
they're unafraid to just like give you the most bizarre mythology, and and sometimes you're just like, okay, whatever. Yeah. So he's a lizard now, you know.
He's a lizard. The Umbrella Corporation sucks. Got it. Yeah, no, it's fine. But I'm so happy that I got to make it through the movie. It's just another one of those things where I definitely saw it when I was a kid. It was kind of in my mind. It was the follow-up to Love at First Bite, which was the great, George Hamilton with Susan St. James, more disco era, late.
How did George Hamilton get famous?
He was old Hollywood. He was like the tail end of the studio system. He hung out with like Norma Shearer and all the kind of grand dames of the old Hollywood system, and they kept promoting him because he was handsome in B movies. Interesting dude. But what I think is fun is that Love at First Bite to me is kind of a classic. I think monster movies never go out of fashion. So it made sense in like the late 70s. I think it came out in 78, 79. It made sense to do a send up of those movies the way when Airplane came around, Airport came out in like, 74, 75. So they were still in the zeitgeist. What I think is funny about this one, which comes out in 81, which after Love at First Bite was a huge hit, they let George Hamilton do what he wanted. And so Fox does this kind of tongue-in-cheek, maybe it's a sort of sequel to the Tyrone Power film from the 40s. Swashbuckling films were so out of vogue. So he's basically aping a genre that was not in the zeitgeist of the time. And as we are entering into the full AIDS crisis with a president who couldn't even say the word AIDS, we have a title from Fox called Zorro the Gay Play. So it's this weird, we're going to talk about old Hollywood stuff that may or may not have been relevant at the time, but to your point, we talked about earlier in the show, there's a vaudevillian sense of comedy, an old-fashioned kind of comedy styling that's coming on here with a super talented cast. Like Brenda Vaccaro is also there. The great Lauren Hutton, is there. This is like, a year
And
after.
they're throwing themselves into this thing.
Rod Lehman, man, he's like at an 11 for the whole film, but like you have this movie that literally opens like in 81 with this film is dedicated to Ruben Mamoulian and the other great filmmakers whose past gives us our future. And I was watching this now as an older person going, nobody in 1981 knew who Mamoulian was. He hadn't been allowed to work since the 50s. I mean, he did do the Tyrone Power classic Zorro, which itself was a remake, best known from Douglas Fairbanks, who George Hamilton with the mustache is more aping the Fairbanks, silent classic.
Right.
So it's this interesting kind of thing. But when I look at like Mamoulian, is like since we're going to get into kind of like, kind of the LGBTQ community and what do we think about this? Thank you, Jimmy. What's interesting about this film is that like Mamoulian once upon a time directed, it's probably my favorite Garbo movie. It's not her best, but it's just the one I like the most. Queen Christina, which is so gay and not even coded. This is where Garbo's walking around in leather pants, open mouth, French kissing her female maid, where she's in drag picking up on John Gilbert. And you're like, this got done? Like, so you've got a director who was doing the biggest lesbian movie. By the way, the real Queen Christina was gay. And so Garbo's like, well, if I'm going to come back for my contract, I want to do Queen Christina. And they're like, the lesbian queen film? That doesn't track with MGM. She's like, I guess I go back to Sweden. They're like, boom, Queen Christina into production. So it's this thing, right? So I think there's this weird connection between kind of queer, sometimes coded, sometimes not, referenceable directors that would mean nothing to anybody in the mainstream 1981 screening, really, sadly.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you've got all these kinds of things going. And then for me, because I was like, I don't know that I can hold up anything that's connected to Zorro the Gay Blade in terms of like paraphernalia. I'm like, oh, but I have one. So my all-time favorite horror film, because it scares the hell out of me because it's really a detective story in a haunted house, is The Changeling. That's right. So Peter Medic directed The Changeling, which, by the way, for the first time, the soundtrack is available on vinyl.
Oh, wow.
Pretty good artwork. And, check out this. It's a double LP.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Melvin Douglas going up the staircase to hell. Counterintuitive in terms of direction. But, hey, he's Peter Medic. He's a Canadian. We like him. Good director. But what's crazy to me is he's coming off of The Changeling, which was nominated for kind of like the Canadian Oscar. And his follow-up is this comedy, Zorro Gay Blade, a year later. So when people talk about range of directors and what studios would never let happen today, they'd be like, hey, the guy who scared the hell out of you with George C. Scott. What about the Hamilton pictures? Follow up to the vampire? Never would happen today. So I just felt like, oh, this is just such an odd, out of time even in 81, which is probably why I think it had a budget of 12.5 and only did about 6 million here. So it's a flop. But I think people didn't know how to market it. And again, he's spoofing a genre that I think had almost no meaning for people. And at the same time, you had Peter O'Toole doing My Favorite Year, playing an actor in a swashbuckling movie. But it was kind of a dead thing. So I think it adds to the charm of this, and that Hamilton was just old enough to want to emulate that kind of genre. I think maybe hoping to bring it back.
And he, like you said, he came from classic Hollywood,
Yeah.
and so he wanted to lampoon classic Hollywood. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Let's bring on Tess Rafferty.
Yes.
Check in with our creator. Hello, creator.
Here it is.
That sounds so biblical when you say check in with our creator. Like, hey, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm especially happy to be discussing this movie with our other guest tonight. So yes, happy to be back.
And that you watched this on HBO a lot when you were a kid. Is that the deal?
Yeah, it was. I can't count how many times I've seen this movie, and every time I do this show with my brother about movies we watched when we were kids, this is the movie I think about all the time because it was something we saw with our family. We could quote it. We often we quoted it to each other and everything. And having not seen it since then, I was like, I can't remember enough of what happened and what out of the many problematic things might be problematic today. And so I, of course, wanted to bring on my guide through navigating this movie. I thought it'd be inappropriate for me to just talk about how much I love this movie without also talking about the context of it and everything. So that's why I reached out to Guy Branum, who had just happened to see it. So let's get Guy on and he can tell us why he happened to just see it. Yes. Hello.
Hey, Guy.
Hello. You didn't need HBO to see this movie. We only had broadcast TV, and somehow I saw it multiple times as a child, such that there were so many bits. Like, I didn't remember the arc of it at all, but the Z2 bit for some reason was like permanently stuck in my mind.
Yes, it is a 2.
Obviously, this movie tanked, and they were willing to license it to anyone for very little money.
I mean,
that's how everyone wanted.
Sexy, zany, sensational Zorro.
Marketing campaign later used by the alcoholic drink Zima.
Oh my God!
Something different.
So where do we start here, Guy?
Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say that watching it, I was really going into it from like not remembering the queer politics of it at all. It's always interesting to watch things that you were exposed to as a child before you knew that you were gay, that were telling you about gay stuff. And I have to say, coming out of it, I was far more shocked and offended from a modern screenwriting perspective than I was any gay stuff. I was like, it acquitted itself relatively well, but the character that gives it its title doesn't show up until the 30-minute mark.
Yeah, we don't actually get it. I was watching, it's like 48 minutes in is when he's putting on the outfit.
Yeah.
And
I hear that's also the problem with Kevin Costner's new Western.
But I love his outfit. It's almost like he's like, conjuring Sia 40 years earlier or something, but it's like the great hat and all this kind of, and the colors that he's always wearing. But
him going with like the fruit colors at a point in time that I don't think most of America was aware of the rainbow flag. I can't imagine that the straight guys who were doing this were aware of the rainbow flag. Like, he was like living the rainbow flag. I enjoyed it.
There's also something kind of, again, seeing it older now, there is a sweetness. So whatever might be problematic, I think that helps you get through, because when you really see, like, I guess the main brother that George Hamilton plays, from the get-go, he's just not very smart. He doesn't pick up on things, but he seems to have a good heart. But it's like he never either seems to pick up that his brother is gay, or he doesn't care, or both. And there's something, the way that I think Hamilton plays that, where he's like, "Oh, you look great. It's something odd about that." He doesn't care. And I think that gives you a lot of room to, have people hopefully not pearl clutch over something that came out in 81 a little bit. There's a sweetness.
It came out at such a particular point in time. We had the sexual revolution in the disco era, but no one yet knew what HIV/AIDS was. And there is a real sort of like, there's something really sad that happens to queer people in media around 1983, where we basically disappear until the George Carlin character in Prince of Tides.
It occurred to me as well that there's something bold about using the word gay in the title of a movie in 1981.
A studio movie.
A studio movie with a heartthrob. right?
Why do you suppose they did that, though?
You know, and just so our audience at home knows, if you haven't seen the movie, George Hamilton plays Diego. What's his name? I can't remember his last name. He comes home. His father has died, and he finds out that his father had been Zorro and bequeaths his mask and his legacy to his two remaining sons, and the only one there is George Hamilton. And then he injures himself, so he can't be Zorro for a while. And just then, Deus Ex Machina, his brother comes home from being in England for 20 years and is very Scarlet Pimpernel.
He is the Scarlet Pimpernel. I was like, it's Anthony Andrews in that TV movie we all had to see. But, you know, yeah.
So and then he takes over the role while George Hamilton is recuperating with a certain flourish. And he is the gay Blade in question. And I think that what like really kind of struck me is, I feel like, again, it's a studio movie with the word gay in the title in 1981. And, you know, it's that thing that I wonder where we would have been had the AIDS epidemic not given this platform for people to start, you know, shaming gay people and demonizing gay people.
Well, you also had around the same period of time, you know, again, another older director in Blake Edwards doing Victor Victoria, which was a huge mainstream hit. You had Dustin Hoffman doing Tootsie around 82. So you had like the beginning of this kind of thing. And you had the great Vito Russo, who wrote, like, again, super important book about kind of queer representation in film from the beginning of Hollywood on, called The Celluloid Closet. Howard Rosenman produced the documentary based on Vito's work, where he talks about everything from, you know, Peter Lorre being coded as gay and The Maltese Falcon. Oh, he smells of gardenia. He walks in and there's weird music and he's chewing on his cane. You're like, slightly gay, Mr. Houston director. Right. So from that all the way up through kind of Philadelphia, because the film kind of ended that year, Lily Tomlin narrates it. And I feel like this is because I think Hamilton is very comfortable with himself. I think when you grow up in Hollywood, and a lot of these famous directors were also gay. I mean, people talk about George Stevens being a female director. He was the gay man who directed with all of the top female stars of his time. And so I think there was always a presence, but I think to your point, when AIDS came in, the Reagan Revolution came in, the rise of the evangelicals, I think we're seeing that, unfortunately, coming back into play. There was a little bit of closeting stuff. And there was always a room, I think, when it was a comedy. And this is a long held debate. Are we laughing at, are we laughing with, you know, and I think comedy allowed us to get by with more queer representation until a point. And then it took us a while to get back there.
I think another thread to trace is that 6 years before this, Blazing Saddles came out, which was originally entitled Tex X, which is just sort of a model of person you don't expect fit into genre film that you know and love. And like so much, like Mel Brooks was so good at those spoofs. I think that this film is clearly trying to like live in that world. It's not as good as a Mel Brooks movie. It's got some good jokes in it, but I do think it is just swapping out blackness for queerness and going into another adventure genre. And there is something that
Blazing Saddles did have its queerness though. Yes. Every time I watch the movie, I'm like, you know, my sister-in-law said it is kind of racist whether you like it or not, and so I have to take her word for it, you know, because she's black. But when I saw the movie, like, it wasn't the racial stuff that made me bristle; it was the Dom DeLuise, you know, gay stuff.
A Kansas City faggot.
Maybe that's too much. Maybe that's too much.
Yes, but also it was co-written by what's his name? Best stand-up comic of all time. Richard Pryor, who, like, at this point in time was openly talking about his bisexuality on stage. You did have this sense that things were opening up about queerness and starting to enter the mainstream. And like so much of even the 2000-year-old man, like, is about this sort of like anxiety and fear around gay stuff a lot of the time. Yeah. And so it is neat to see it pop up so explicitly here. You just wish it had been a little bit better movie.
It's weird. Like, let's try to make it a tongue-in-cheek sequel to Tyrone Powers. Zorro, Tyrone, who was bisexual by most accounts as well. Mm-hmm. And so there's this concept that gay people showed up in movies. Like, no, we've always kind of been there. But it's interesting to see, to your point, like this was put into production before Reagan was elected. And so it's very much of its time. And within 2 years, to your point, the band played on, and, early Frost, I think, with Aidan Quinn on network television was one of those movies that suddenly, we had a different conversation. And I think I don't think it's a profound thought, but I think obviously the AIDS epidemic stopped kind of the queer civil rights movement, because it was about trying to stay alive as a generation of men mm-hmm. wiped out. And so that stopped the forward progress politically. So there is something really wild about this movie coming out at the dawn of what would become the Reagan Revolution, and all the fun that brought people.
But here's also a thing, though. We didn't no gay people are killed in this movie, which you cannot say for a lot of gay movies and gay comedies that came after it.
Speaking of cruising, right on time. You've got the director of The Exorcist, right, doing Cruising with Al Pacino, going out on a limb. In its day, it was always controversial because it represented a very small portion of kind of the S&M, right, men's sort of. But Friedkin gets into trouble because he uses, every time someone's getting stabbed, subliminal flashes, way before Fincher did this with Tyler Durden in Fight Club, right? 2 or 3 images of like really hardcore male porn in a mainstream film that the studio didn't pick up on until later. But like, so you had a really progressive A star in Pacino. And even that was like, that stopped after we went 2 or 3 years later,
I almost wonder if there's like a reverse Bechdel test or a sideways Bechdel test. Like what's interesting about this character in this movie is that, as Guy pointed out, he is not killed. He's not even the subject of controversy or ridicule. There's a few, references to he sounded like a poof, but his gayness is not a storyline at all. He's just a guy who shows up, becomes a hero. It's and at the end, his brother who never has an issue with it says, "What am I going to do without you?" It's really sweet when they're like, "What, I don't want you to go. This has been nice."
How would you say? I like all that you're saying. I think, could the offense that someone takes now to this be in the performance, or is the performance that George Hamilton is giving as the gay brother fine? Is it good gay, or is it bad gay?
I think this is a really great question, because when people talk about the question of casting straight people as gay people, it's always like, we've all seen it done well. The problem is that it's systemic, that gay actors don't get the opportunities to prove themselves to the point that they do get a shot at those big roles. But also, so frequently, it is about broadness or parody, or when it comes to women kissing women, they just are always touching each other's hair. And just sort of a basic level, there's the Brian Fuller thing of on American Gods, they went off and second unit shot a scene, and he was like, yeah, 2 men can't have sex in that position because a penis won't reach. So you have to go back and do this, understanding how basic things work. And I think that what Tess was saying about the character having a spirit and an integrity, it gives it a lot of, I give it a lot of deference to the performance, and the performance was broad in 1981, but also his performance as a straight guy was kind of broad in 1981.
True story. Yeah, I think he's just lovely to watch. I mean, he just seems like a nice person who's a bit of a ham, and he's going for it. And I just feel like
if bit.
But I would say that sharpen their knives at this, I feel a little bit like one's missing the point. I don't think there's a cruelty or a meanness or anything about what's going on.
It's a little dunderheaded, that's all.
What character in this movie is not to some extent a drag performance? what character is not? I mean, it's essentially saying all of this is camp. Being the hero is camp. Being the villain, like I would say, that it created so much room for the villain to be so campy. It created so much room for Brenda Vaccaro to do what Brenda Vaccaro does.
Fabulous. Also, there's something fun about of the two, if we're going to be reductive, the Butch brother. Oh, I hurt my ankle. I guess you'll have to be the hero, right? It's like, and then he plays half the movie without a limp, and you're like, cool. Like, it just doesn't matter. But there's something lovely about, no, you do it. But even the idea that he's not smart when he first sees like the Scarlet Pimpernel version of his brother coming back, they're clearly it's the same actor. He's like, who are you? And you're like, he's your twin brother, clearly, because he looks exactly like you. The way that Harrison plays it, it's like, or Hamilton plays it, you're just like, this is so charming. He's like, oh, you're my brother that was separated at birth. Okay, I'll be right down.
It's clear from the get-go, though, that the straight brother, he's a lover, not a fighter. So that's why he's playing up his injury to get his gay brother to take care of the problems.
Also, when you're wearing those like white satin and lace pants in the opening scene as the Lothario, what? There's a lot of
there's a lot of goodness going on there. But there again, I think it's the sweetness. But even it's funny. I found this production still I wanted to add, because he's incapable of just taking a normal picture in character. Like, he's aping for, hey!
Oh, yeah.
He just, and it's like Lauren Hutton's understanding the assignment. He's like, look at me. I made up my performance in the still picture from, Fox. And there's something just lovely about, he's like, look, I'm coming off a big studio hit. This one's going to work too. I'm just going to have fun. And you're like, well, timing maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to tell with the low res copy I watched, but I got the sense that this movie's actually pretty well shot and edited, and there's some cool shots. I mean, this is the end shot, which looked like shit on my TV, but I was like, I bet that looked really good when it was in theaters. And there's a lot of them. There's one I can't. The things are so small, it's hard to see. This one. I really like this shot. This was cool.
Gorgeous.
Oh, when she arrives in the town.
And just he's peering at her through the back window and she's sort of clueless about it. That's a good shot.
It's a good shot, but it's also an old-fashioned shot. It's what we used to do to save time, where you have a two shot where in real life they can't see each other. But in some movies they talk to each other like that. It's a conceit from the old system, right? So to have that shot employed in 81, it's like, okay, now I know why you're referencing Mamillion, who did that repeatedly in his films because they had to go. But so there's a wink to old Hollywood and all this. She's pretty much looks like Grace Kelly from High Noon when she shows up, except she's like a progressive political fighter who's handing out pamphlets and doing her thing. And she's modern, even in the constraints of this film too. In terms
watching this now, you talk about the sweetness, Tracy. Watching this now, for me, the thing that kept me compelled and enjoying the comedy throughout was this. It was an anti-fascist movie. It's like she's there and she inspires this guy to be Zorro and fight fascism. That's what it's all about. It couldn't be more now.
American movies that think they are anti-fascist, I think are just libertarian, anti-socialist, get off of my lawn. Like, Americans love a movie about how you shouldn't have to pay taxes.
Exactly.
The flip side of it, yes. There's that too.
Yes, and that's right. That's a great point, Howard. That is true. The great Max Steiner, again, from the classic Hollywood system. The score is so overwrought intentionally, but you used to have those kinds of, I always think of my favorite is Errol Flynn as Robin Hood, with the great Basil Rathbone, we know as maybe Sherlock Holmes. He's like, oh, you speak treason. He's like, fluently, and then the score comes in and it's just this grand, thing. And I feel like this film captures that camp spirit that they didn't mean to be camp, but it's impossible to watch Battle with that accent talking to Flynn. And you're like, this is just the best thing ever.
or did they mean to be camp?
It's hard to say with that.
Camp happens, I think, in spite of it. Like, I think if you try, it's a little hard, unless you're John Waters and you can do anything. But
well, I definitely think with Zorro the Gay Blade, it feels like they're camping it up. I mean, At a certain point, the performances almost seem desperate to prove that they're all having fun. But I like that about it.
I just want to take a moment and say how much I love Gods and Monsters for putting into my heart and mind the issue of which gay directors in the 1930s and 40s were envious of which directors. Like, just trying to wrap your head around, are the rich guys like who get to make the women's pictures? Are they who are super cool? Is it these guys who are getting to churn out adventure movies but make them fun and campy, and probably getting to cast cuter boys than when you're making a Betty Davis movie? I just love that it gave me the idea of the world of a George Cukor pool party.
Yeah, absolutely. And then with James Whale, for Invisible Man, and Frankenstein and The Bride, and but like also the metaphor of the other, the monster, all that kind of stuff. I think that translates historically. I find Frankenstein so fascinating. Anyway, the idea that Mary Shelley, I think, was actually 18 when she wrote it, published 2 years later. But like, you've got a teenage girl who redefines the novel, essentially, and then that work of hers through James Whale's very queer lens basically establishes the universal monster film, because people have to remember, like, we were just into early sound, right? So Lugosi's Dracula comes out in 1931, as does Karloff as the monster in Frankenstein in 31. That's early sound. And you already have a queer filmmaker leading a huge studio, basically setting up their entire brand was horror. And it's because of that filmmaker. And so again, it's interesting to see things that are coded. I think if one were to watch what Whale does with The Invisible Man, it is very camp, that screaming, shrill, high made, and all this kind of comedy and stuff. That is definitely playing for a queer audience differently than I think the mainstream audience that saw that film in 31.
Well, and in Zorro the Gay Blade sort of reflects the danger that comes with releasing the coding. As long as we have coding, we have somewhere to hide, and
it's
like
for straight audiences, I think.
But also for gay audiences. For gay audiences, once you have the identification that you want, but don't have to do any more than that, it's safe. But the minute that character is representing you unquestionably, like, there's a lot of danger that comes with it. This is the additional danger of, I don't think that any of these people involved were queer filmmakers or in any way trying to think about it with love or respect, which is why I was surprised by the amount of love and respect.
But there's also winks in there. I mean, it's a not so obvious thing. What was the line where the Scarlet Pimpernel version comes? The brother comes in and he's like, "Oh, I went into the Navy. They, say it makes you a man. Oh, they made a man out of me." And you're like, "Okay, you're going there in a studio picture. Great." The Village people are rocking it. And I think half of straight America didn't get that those were fun either.
Yeah.
So it's like, why did we hate disco? Probably because it was queer forward, right? We could talk about that too. I mean, so there's always these kinds of
and black. I mean, historically, it's why it,
or an Indian or this or that, and
why it didn't get played, and why there was a thing against it. I mean, this might be, I don't know if this is naivete, but again, watching it last night after not having seen it in 35 years or whatever it's been, I did think, I'm like, well, I know it's white straight guys making this movie, but they're guys working in Hollywood. They they have to have gay friends. I mean, they don't have to, but there's a chance that, again, they're living in a world where it's not that, it's not that big of a deal.
Whether they know it or not, they have gay friends.
Well, they do, but I'm guessing they know who they are too. It's, Los Angeles and 1981. It's like the drama department everywhere. I mean,
there was nothing mean-spirited about either of George Hamilton's questionable characters. It wasn't hateful. You can tell that.
But Tess, to your point, it's like, why they were clearly more aware of, I have to look the hairdresser or my real estate agent in the eye after this movie. And that didn't, that didn't bump The Hangover or, some of the stuff that you get in Judd Apatow movies, why didn't they sort of think about I live in a community with gay people. Maybe I shouldn't make this joke.
Right. Yeah. Am I going to be embarrassed if somebody's talking about this on a, podcast today?
One of my favorite examples of that, by favorite, I mean, what the fuck, moments where like you had like, of course I don't look to Michael Bay to show me anything other than editing, but like, when he does The Rock and they go out of their way to have a scene where Sean Connery, this is a man who was wearing a partial hairpiece in 1962's Dr. No, right? This guy has never had hair. So the concept of like Connery is getting a haircut, it's that gross scene is there just so he can literally slap this gay male hairdresser who is the worst affectation you've ever seen. And you're like, that was like 96-ish. And we thought that was
Isn't that the guy who starred in Yes, Dear?
Yes. Yeah.
That ran for 8 years and I didn't know anyone who watched it.
Why do that? But that's mean-spirited. It's an easy laugh. It's a terrible joke. But it's also like, why? Then you cut to this film, which is like 16 years before, and there's a sweetness. And I just feel like, why are we going out of our way in a Bruckheimer film that has enough money to blow up 2 Lamborghinis to do that?
Compare that character. So Beverly Hills Cop, Damon Wayans is gay guy who gives the free bananas.
Yeah.
How is that in comparison to the Rock? Is it the same, or is it just a cheap joke, or is it okay?
I never thought that was particularly funny, but I mean, I think it was a cheap joke, but it might have worked for people.
I mean, that is a broad performance. God, like, do I have love in my heart for them doing Men on Film on In Living Color? Yes, but I do think that like the dominant mode, the only representation that we had for queer people was generally straight guys doing a broad caricature of, isn't this person ridiculous, for such a long time.
Even the way they do the dance and the screaming and the limp wrist, which is such a cliche even then, but even here, you've got these 2 actors. It's not mean, but it is over the top. But the whole movie's over the top. So
I mean, Guy, to your point about things like The Hangover, I just think that there's, maybe the difference is there are people who believe comedy is about punching down. And maybe it's not about where in history they are. Maybe quote unquote, we got lucky that whoever got behind Zorro the Gay Blade, it was people who didn't want to punch down so much. And now people don't understand the difference. Some people don't understand the difference.
Well, it's like in that scene, that's Ron goddamn Liebman. That's a man who is married to Linda Lavin and Jessica Walter. To test his point, like, A, he knows from gay men, and B, he's going to have to look them in the eyes. Right. I sort of didn't have a problem.
No.
Like, even when he was mincing, I was like, this is grounded mincing.
But exactly.
Drama Desk Award winner.
Exactly. But again, like he was like owning it with like, Sally Field and Norma Ray, which comes out in 79. So just 3 years before, he's doing one of the best dramas ever. Talk about, union and being paid fairly as opposed to taxes. But like the fact that he can do that, and I think Jeff pointed out earlier that there is a Friends connection that, they would be on Friends later as a different generation, but I do feel like that's what's so cool about movies.
Also, just to interject, he won a couple of awards for playing Roy Cohn in Angels in America.
Yeah.
He's a New York theater guy. He is, he, again, to your point, he's got to face the hairdresser backstage. He's comfortable. He knows what's going to fly and what's not. And he has a love in his heart.
The comment about straight men broadly playing gay characters is interesting to me, because when I started acting in Los Angeles and I would go in for gay characters, I would just do it like myself. I didn't. And then the coded note I get from the casting director was, that was good. Can you make him a little bit more fun? And I would not. I would not, because I felt weird doing that.
Well, and I think that we all know stuff that comes along with being gay. And I do think that there was a period of time, sort of like happy endings. What if we have the gay character and he's gay for jokes, but we don't see it in any other way kind of thing. And I don't think that that's reflective. I mean, if that is one of many like representations, fine. But when it is one of the few representations that we get, it gets annoying. And I think being able to calibrate and code what is the little bit of sugar in his tank, but also not make it enormous or define the character. Like, is there something else about this character? And I'm sure, Paco was really hard when it was like, a 3-line gay waiter or something like that. Being able to calibrate it is not something that you can do as easily.
Right. And I think, the thing about the debate, whenever we're talking about an underrepresented group, right? It could be people of color, it could be gay people, it could be women, whatever it is that the more of us that are represented, the more it's going to get the spectrum, because you run the risk on either thing of like, well, if all women are doing is talking about buying shoes, that's not what all women do. But some women do, it's that sort of thing. Like, we also want to introduce that, some humor comes out of people being themselves to the fullest extent of what that means. Let's, and that's okay too. We don't want to say like that's wrong or something. It's that like, not all gay people blank. No, they don't. But some do. And we want that to be okay and show that. But at the same time, and that's why we just need more of everybody represented so we can get that breath.
Yeah.
Of,
I do have a clip from the movie that I'd like to show you guys.
Yay.
I don't know if you remember this scene, but I believe this is the first scene where Hamilton and Hutton kind of get into it when she's first arrived in town. I apologize for not going 100% on this to people who aren't politically correct. Here we go.
Could you tell me where I might find a decent inn?
An inn? With all your talk about the pit bull, I see you like a decent inn. And you wear expensive clothes, not rags. And you smell of the salty perfumes, not the ship oil.
Ship oil? You mean the oil from boats?
No. Ship oil from the ships in the field.
What ships in the field?
You have never heard of the ships in the field? The little ba-ba-bas.
Oh, you mean sheep?
Yes, that is what I said.
No, you said ship. Forgive me, but you have a very pronounced accent.
Aha, you are trying to change the subject from the fact that you are very wealthy.
I am not very wealthy.
After all, what poor woman can afford 3 names? Answer me that if you can, Senorita Charlotte Taylor Wilson.
I have a small inheritance.
Aha!
But it occurred to me that I must do something with my life, not just pose and preen like a pathetic peacock.
Yeah, Hillary. Yeah, Todd did mustache acting.
I just needed something to distract from the fact that I wasn't in brown face and I wasn't doing the accent except for the words that mattered for the comedy.
I love it.
We should probably say here that there's a lot of problematic things about the accents in this movie. That did not age well. I was like, there's none of the cast is actually Latino. That's an ass that we'll have to have Lombardo to come back and we can discuss it from that perspective.
Yeah.
But Tess, the Don Bernardino from San Diego.
Oh my God.
That bit you had to be like, that's good writing, right?
I remember it from when I was a kid, and then when I had this on last night, my husband walked in and was like, he heard that bit. He goes, "That's a good joke."
It's a good joke.
I'm Luis Obispo from like San Bernardino. They're like just doing all these like Californian names.
It reminds me, and I can't remember who said it years ago in stand up. Local jokes lead to local work.
Oh
yeah.
And it is
That's why Born in East LA didn't do well at the box office.
It's such a California joke, that whole run with all the towns. Yeah, but it was a good one. Yeah, it's and there's.
If you love those, you should see Chris Pine's The Pool Man, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I was saying before we got on tonight that I think that this movie, when I saw it again last night, have not seen it in a long time, and maybe it's because I remember the bits from childhood. I don't know, but I do feel like it's a masterclass in comedic timing. I feel everybody is just, there's so many throwaway lines at the end of scenes, or just that people mutter under their breath. And as big as they're playing it, there are these other moments that just, like someone else is talking and they're just kind of uttering it. It reminds me of that kind of MASH cadence that they had. And it's amazing timing. I mean, you could tell like everybody, it's an amazing cast, and you could tell that everybody has got the chops to do comedy. And that was what I was really impressed with watching it.
Well, and also going from such verbal play to such big physical moments. I mean, those sort of like long shot of the ballroom, like fight scenes. It's just like, it's impressive directing. I don't know how a person would do it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot. There's a couple different genres packed into this 90 minutes of movie.
Yeah, you're right. There is a scope to it. There is a sense of play, and there is, if you are into the swashbuckling genre, they are quoting a lot of these classic things. I just think they were already out by the time they were doing it, which makes it extra fun watching it many years later. But
people didn't know what they were, what the jokes were. But it's interesting to me because the first time I saw Airplane, I laughed.
Yeah.
And I remember showing it to my son when he was little, and he like, we were watching it and laughing, and he goes, "Dad, I peed my pants." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's so funny. I peed my pants too." And he's like, "No, I peed my pants." He actually peed his pants. He was laughing so hard. But I didn't show him Airport or Airport 75 before we watched it.
Well,
he just
you have to see it. I mean, I love the Airport movie. What's crazy is the first Airport actually was nominated for Best Picture, and I think it's the worst of the bunch. But Airport 75
it's a drama at an airport that has a disaster at the very end.
But
like that movie Hereditary with Toni Collette. It's just a boring drama, but then it's suddenly a possession movie at the end.
But I think the sequels get it right, because I think 75 with Karen Black, I mean, my God, talk about like camp. You've got, Gloria Swanson in a turban playing Gloria Swanson with a turban, sitting there. But 77, 79 Concord, I think those films really get it right. And I didn't see those films when Mom took me to see Airplane. But to your point, Airplane just worked for me because it's funny. I don't know that people watching Airplane today are like, who's that guy at the end? That's Howard Jarvis. That's Proposition 13. No one remembers that. But you know what I mean? But in its day, that joke landed for people. Right. But there's still so many jokes. If you don't get that joke, there's 10 more. To Tessa's point, in this one, there's constant throwaways and lines, and everyone's having. So you kind of just have to keep up. If you don't like this joke, don't worry. In 2 seconds, there's another one. And I think that helps with this hour and a half pacing. The comedy should be fast. Are you listening, Judd Apatow? With all due respect, I don't know why your director's going to put Lawrence of Arabia's runtime. Let's talk about that with Knocked Up. Let's go. And I think this film, it understands the assignment, as the kids would say today, and it gets it right.
Speaking of getting it right, let's. There's a comment, Jeff Luce, in there about representation.
Yes.
Do we do that? And I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, but I think, you have to see it to get it, and it totally matters. You know,
I'm still always struck by, way back when we started this, having Dibs bear on to talk about just one of the guys,
right?
And how seeing the main character go undercover as a boy to get a scoop gave Dibs a context where they were able to see themselves in a way they hadn't seen on, in represented in any culture. And I'm always like, and that's why Dibs has always had a fondness for this movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was the first time they saw themselves.
And in a mainstream, designed to be seen by the age of your peers back then movie. Like, it was okay. And I think that's a big thing too. I mean, I think it's all representation. I mean, I definitely connected with Alien for that. Oh, the smart lady who makes good choices gets to live. Cool. Like, it works.
I don't think any of the queer people that we saw in mainstream film up through the 1990s gave you a comfortable sense of identification for gay men. Nobody is looking at this like it's fun, and I think it is nice and softening for straight people, but I think that there are always so many sharp edges on any queer presented figure that you can't comfortably identify, which is why, we were still going, Betty Davis, Katharine Hepburn, what is Meryl Streep? I think for most gay men, all you had were the women who have strong opinions to be able, a nice Sigourney Weaver. And I think even now we're struggling, I would say with the Heartstoppers children, we've sanded down all of the pokey edges and just given you the softest thing to identify with. And I think we still haven't really figured out how to provide gay characters who feel authentic and identifiable, mostly because so many of them are still played by straight guys and written by straight guys.
And I think that's an yes, exclamation point. And one of the things that I really took away from, Vito wrote about it first, but then it was in, the Celluloid Closet, like they interview Shirley MacLaine, and she talks about which is again the children's hour. It's like, a child alleges that a teacher's a lesbian who may have looked at her or touched her inappropriately. It's again the kid's lying, but it's destroying this woman's life. And she was saying, like MacLaine said in the interview, "Isn't it crazy? Here I am acting opposite Audrey Hepburn in the children's hour, and she and I never had a conversation about lesbianism. We never had a conversation about any of it." And she's like, "Today, I would like to think that character wouldn't say, why, and cry, and I have to hang myself." She's like, "We never even had the conversation on set." And that's with two A-list safe stars that got the studio say, "We can make that movie then." But even then, it wasn't really representational, and you had two lead actresses who never had the conversation, which is crazy as an artist, I think. What are you playing if not that in the scene?
All right. That actually made me step back and say that Sebastian Venable, the off-camera gay cannibal son in Suddenly Last Summer, was actually someone where we could say, I am there on screen, except gently off screen. There was
you got eaten for your efforts.
Yes. Like during those 1960s Tennessee Williams days, you did sort of have some juicy stuff up there. But it's kind of crazy that at the end of the studio system, because only young men got to be the new wave directors of the 1970s, we broke everything open and we could hang around with the Secaucus Six. But there weren't real queer people there because no queer people or women were writing or directing.
Right, but again, to your point, right, with Something Last Summer, you have Gore Vidal writing the script, who famously, in the studio's like, "This is disgusting, it's cannibalism, it's sex, it's breasts," and he's like, "Thank you," and right? And it's like Gore knew what he was doing. It's like when Charlton Heston talked about not knowing what you're playing, right? Ben-Hur, the Tale of the Christ, which we always forget is the real name, and Heston's like, "So, do you like snails or do you like?" I'm like, "Dude, it's the gayest scene ever with Tony Curtis and Laurence Olivier, and then suddenly you have like William Boyd is talking to Heston, and you're like, how did Gore Vidal get away with this? And the fact that Heston never figured it out is one of my favorite things about Charlton Heston. I have very few things that are my favorite thing about Charlton Heston. That is one of them.
Let me. I have a question. I kind of like to wrap up our Zorro the Gay Blade discussion with this question. I want to hear you guys basically pitch this movie to somebody who's never seen it before and who's young, and like, why should someone who hasn't seen this movie, who's young right now, maybe give it a shot? Guy, you want to go first?
Would you like to see the most fun, openly gay performance possible before Nathan Lane in the birdcage?
Good hook.
That's good. What about you, Tess?
I think, how would I pitch it? I'd probably say, like, you wouldn't believe what we could get away with comedies in the 80s. Yeah.
This is rated PG, right?
Yeah.
I think it was PG. I think maybe it was G.
I think it was PG.
Yeah.
Well, what about you, Trace?
I really, and this is a big issue I have right now with everyone just being triggered by things that I think aren't triggering or shouldn't be triggering. Like when I have to read headlines, oh, we're doing the Jason universe. Fuck you. No, there's no universe there. It's stop going to Camp Crystal Lake, problem solved. Okay, boom, moving on. But like, I think we need to understand the context. And I feel like we are living through a regression right now. And there was this moment where there was progress, and there was progress because then there's a backlash. And so there's something really interesting about this film. I think the comedy would date it for younger people. I don't know that they would get it, but I think if you care about film, if you care about politics, and if you're interested in kind of queer cinema through a different lens, a straight lens all around on this one in terms of the writers and directors and the stars, it's just worth seeing because it's charming if you can find it. I just feel like now that Fox has bought Disney, good luck. I don't think they're going to be releasing this anytime soon, but you could Google it and maybe find it online, y'all. But I just think it's a footnote movie that's charming for a certain generation that people who are thoughtful might connect with, because I think we're about to go through, and have been, I think, perhaps since 2016, a regression where certain communities are being throttled. And this film celebrates right before that happened with Reagan. And I think there's a parallel. And I think that films reflect the time in which, I think they can give hope. And there might be a young filmmaker who watches this and says, this might spark a new idea that could be clever and of the now. And that is inspiring. And I think we need to stand on the shoulders of those that came before and keep moving the ball forward and stop with, like your point, Guy, about The Hangover. There's so much. I always see these macho shithead movies. To me, the gayest movie ever is like Predator. I'm like, guys, just get a room.
Oh yeah,
room. It's like, I love that. But like my straight guy friends who love it, they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, really? What am I talking about? Okay.
I actually spent last night wondering, is there a way to do this movie right today? Is there a fun, straight brother, gay brother, overthrowing tyranny that's a comedy,
Well, we've been watching Jonathan Bailey romance women on Bridgerton and romance men and so many other things. And thinking about it, I was just like, how fun would it be to see his Lothario and his version of the most fun gay guy in 19th century Los Angeles?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jonathan Bailey in anything.
For me, I'd probably tell a young person, look, if you like goofy shit, you're going to have a good time. But trigger alert, the ginger representation is offensive. Offensive. All right, should we do our ending seg, starting with our classic Be Bad or Be Best? Tracy and I will both offer a title. And Tess and Guy, please tell us if it's so bad no one should ever see it, or it's so bad everyone should see it. Okay. Be bad or be best. Tracy, you want to go first?
Okay. this is from the 90s, back when we had female leads together in a studio picture. They made this one too, y'all. Perhaps some subtexts that are interesting you could read for different audiences. The great Barbet Schroeder directed this, the Roommate from Hell film we probably all could relate to on some level. This would be Single White Female, written by Get Out and Proud Dan Roos. Two ladies who probably shouldn't have been roommates. Guy, be bad, be best. Thoughts?
Be best. Be best.
All right.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, Tess.
I'm gonna go with Be Best too. I remember, loving it in the movie theater. It's given us a vernacular, because now it's a shorthand that we all use. Like, she's going totally single white female, and anytime you can see a guy get it through the eye. with a pre-Manolo stiletto heel is a good time. While he's fucking. Sorry, yes.
Yes, that was quite a feat. Mr. Todd.
Oh, I mean, it's a Be Best for me. Yeah. I'm just a sucker for most 90s trashy thrillers of any kind. This one was a great twist on the trashy thriller.
Yeah, and I felt like, first of all, I just miss Bridget Fonda. But I think there's also, if you go back and watch this film, the cinematography is stunning. Like, it's a gorgeously shot film. Like, it's was a programmer, but elevated, I think, with someone like Barbet. And again, I feel like, for better or for worse, when TV procedurals came in, mostly CSI post Shadow of 9/11, we have to get the good guys in an hour, that kind of thing. I think we started losing these thrillers to procedurals on TV. And this, to me, was like one of the last gasps of, oh, this is interesting. And it also deals with like interesting women dynamics and things. And I think there's a lot in that movie. I think it holds up better. And if you haven't seen it recently, I just thought, well, that's a good one to bring up. So, Todd, what do you have for Be Back?
Well, because we were talking about cable perennials that we saw a lot when we were kids, every time I went over to my friend's house that had the descrambler for the pay cable bill, every time I went there, this movie was playing. Every single time. I saw this movie so many times at my friend's house. The only thing I remember about it now is there's a scene. It's Fast Break with Gabe Kaplan, by the way, who's
welcome back.
He's having a ball. The only scene I remember is they get pulled over by the cops, and one of the kids has a big bag of weed, and he eats all the weed. So it doesn't, and then he's high, really high, which is a bit that has been used so many times since I saw it in Fast Break. Like, it was in Super Troopers. It's used all the time. So a guy, Fast Break, Be Bad or Be Best.
I have never seen this film, but I would watch anything with Gabe Kaplan. Be best.
All right, that's great, Tess.
I have never heard. I've never seen this film either, but I've heard a lot of good things about it, and it occupies the same place in my mind as the Paul Newman, forgive me, hockey movie that I can't remember the title.
Oh, Slapshot.
Slapshot. Yeah.
Slapshot is a classic.
That's awesome.
Fast Break and Slapshot, at some point, I think I thought they were the same movie. So I'm just going to say Be Best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jeff said something about The White Shadow.
The White Shadow, which was great.
Yeah. That was it. Yeah. It's
very important television show.
Not as good as that. Yeah.
Linda Howard, friend of show. Ken Howard's wife.
And Bruce Paltrow, the good Paltrow, as I like to say.
All right, let's do the boost. This is where we say something that's new or old or something that we just want to say, hey, this is great. Maybe you didn't think about that. You should check it out. Tracy, what's yours?
Oh my God. I'm in love with this movie the way I was in love with Cats. This is Madam Web. This is fantastic. My thesis with this is that Dakota Johnson, bless her, She's Gina Gershon from Showgirls, only she knows that she's in a dumpster fire that's like massive. It's fantastic. Sony, in order to keep the Spider-Man rights, every couple of years has to make a new something from the Spider-Verse or they lose it. So it's literally, that's why, we have to get Tom Holland because we're already done with Tobey Maguire, which we're already done with Andrew Garfield. So it's like they just keep making these things because they have to have a release date to keep the rights. So this was an attempt to have a female Spider-Verse kind of thing going on. But Dakota Johnson, I think, is so good in this. Like, she throws away lines. Like, she should be in the Jonathan Bailey remake. She should be the Lauren Hutton character. She's like, hi. So my favorite scene is like she's introduced as an EMT who drives an ambulance. She almost runs over half of New York trying to get to the, like, as an EMT. We find out within 2 minutes she hates children. So then the plot is you have to babysit these 3 teens where the nerd is Sydney Sweeney. I'm like, really? Not with those taped down breasts. Okay, go. And she's like, okay, you guys, I'm going to leave you in the forest. I have to go figure out some things. Just stay here for 3 hours. And then she turns around. Just don't do anything dumb. I'm like, they're 3 teenage girls. You're abandoning them in the woods. What's the plan, Dakota? She goes and she's like, she gets like, there's the box of secrets that only characters have in movies and TV shows, where she takes out her mom's leather journal that's not aged, but it was in the Amazon 30 years ago, as if she's never read it before. You guys, and she's talking to her cat because no one else is in the scene. So she's talking to her cat. I think there's like a tribe of spider people. Maybe because mom was bit. I could be that. How would I know if I don't have powers if I don't try? So Dakota puts down mom's journal. Right? This is the granddaughter of Tippi Hedren, the mother of Melanie Griffiths, her mom. She takes out her hands like this and she throws herself on her bedroom wall and then slides down like she's in a Laurel and Hardy movie, looks at her cat and goes, let's not talk about that. And I'm like, oh my God, she's at a baby shower with a pregnant Emma Roberts going, my mom died in childbirth. I mean, it was bad. I mean, it wasn't that bad. I mean, it was bad because she died. Giggle. I'm like, it's so brilliant. You can't believe it came out. And it just keeps going better from there. The villain, his entire performance was ADR'd because they changed the plot. So when Dakota, if you go on YouTube, Dakota's like, I signed up for another movie and they just didn't shoot that. So whenever you get to the guy, like in a couple of scenes, he's like, well, I thought, and it's like nothing matches. And there's a scene where he expositionally explains the plot and his lips aren't moving. And you're like, this is a Sony Pictures release in 2020, the year of our Lord. It is fantastic. It is. If I were a drag queen, I would have all of her monologues and I would be Madam Web in every show. I highly recommend it. It is the worst studio picture of the year. And I bought it. And by the way, they spent $25. You get Madam fucking Web. And by the way, in the comic book, not to be too much of a nerd, Madam Web is an old woman in a wheelchair who's blind. So naturally they cast 32-year-old Dakota Johnson. Rent it. Do not pass go. You have to.
Did you get it on 4K or just a standard?
Oh no, I did Amazon. It was like literally, they're like, you can rent it for $5.99 or buy it for $9.99 because it was originally $25 and no one was buying it. I think it's the best comedy of the year. I loved it. So I want to boost the hell out of Madam Web. There's also, without giving anything away, there's a set piece where someone gets killed by a piece of a Pepsi sign, and you're like, how did Pepsi go? That's how our brand should be used.
Yeah.
Like, let's kill someone with our sign. It's
like a metaphor for diabetes or something. Guy, you have a boost. We want to hear it.
Yes. I would like to boost a YouTube creator named Jenny Nicholson and another YouTube creator called Defunct Land. They both do feature-length documentaries about things at the Disney parks. Jenny Nicholson just did 4 hours about the failed Disney Star Wars immersive experience. It's amazing, but also there is a Defunct Land video about FastPass where he created his own computer simulation of an amusement park to figure out the most efficient way of organizing ride assignments. Magnificent work out there.
I love this. This sounds awesome.
I'm going to boost this randomly because the Zorro got me thinking about these Musketeer movies. I don't know why I think of those things. Oh, because of the swords. And there was this Disney movie that came out, in the late 80s, early 90s, that the critics hated, and it didn't do very well. And it had, a bunch of Brat Packers that I liked, and Oliver Platt. It's Disney's live action, The Three Musketeers. It's got Charlie Sheen, Rebecca De Mornay, of course, who I was in love with back then. Chris O'Donnell's in it. It's fine. It's just delightful. Everybody, this is like Zorro the Gay Blade. The entire cast is having so much fun doing this movie. It's impossible not to enjoy it. I mean, unless you hate seeing people enjoy shit, which is fine. It's okay if you do. But so I thought I'd boost that. It's hard to find. You can get it on DVD, but it's crappy. It's not even enhanced for a 16:9 TV. It's the only way to do it. And I don't know why Disney's weird about certain titles. They're like, we're not sharing this anymore. But, maybe find an illegal copy of it or something.
Not that we're endorsing that.
No, don't. I mean, I'm not endorsing it, but if you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice.
Right.
Guys, I'm so sorry. Someone is knocking on my door. I'm going to have to leave a little bit early. I am so sorry.
No worries.
Get out of here. Go into your door. See you later. All right. Thanks, Guy. All right. This is the last thing. The indie effect.
Yes.
This is our new segment suggested by John Keating, where we talk about character from a movie, any movie, who was completely unnecessary. Tracy, I'll go first.
Okay.
Just because I don't know how interesting mine really is. But I went with a character who, and this is a franchise character who was necessary in the first movie, and he was definitely necessary in the third movie, but in the fifth most recent installment, and the reason why I picked it is because of the movie we watched tonight with the brown face. I'm talking about Sala from Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, a completely unnecessary moment just so they could give him a paycheck. And then he later complained about not being underused in it. And also I'm like, given, the wokeness of Hollywood, I'm like, so that's the character you had to just jam in there without making any use of, just to have a nostalgic moment with Indiana Jones. It was, to me, it wasn't the brown face element that was offensive, because I've already accepted that from John Rhys Davies in this franchise.
From 1981, the same year as the film we talked about tonight.
Yeah, it was just that, don't try to pull on my heartstrings by just throwing nostalgia in my face. It had nothing to do with the narrative. It didn't matter. And he was just like, can't we go on adventures anymore, Indy? And Indy's like, no, that's over, in the middle of a nearly 3-hour adventure movie. Just bad.
Now, Todd, you have a cold heart.
When Karen Allen shows up at the end, I also reacted as, oh, for fuck's sake, and then I cried. But that's
I cried when Marion shows up. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, I just
you that song.
I was crying before she came in because I was like, holy shit, when is this going to end? And then I cried when she came in because I was like, finally, she's the best part of everything she's in, and how we've let that get past us is beyond me. She's the, she humanizes Scrooge. She was the best part of this. I would
Animal House. She's
Starman.
Oh my God, Starman. She's
John Carpenter's love story, y'all. It doesn't get enough respect.
And Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is not her fault.
By the way, I was going to say, if Sala was irrelevant in this film, she was irrelevant in all of Crystal Skull was irrelevant. It was unfucking watchable, and people who don't hate it have forgotten how bad it is. Oh, killer ants! Oh, it's Shia LaBeouf called Mutt.
I've seen it a bunch of times, and I ultimately like it more than Dial of Destiny. And here's why: because it's worse. It swings harder and it misses harder. And anyway, Tracy, before we get in an hour-long debate, do you have?
I feel like this is like when you walk in on a couple having a fight, No,
I just feel like Dial of Destiny is like,
and you're like, hey, maybe you should have just canceled on dinner. Yeah.
No, but I think you're right. I think in the fifth one, like I think it's this fan service. I think that's why he's there. He's a beloved character, and so they brought him back because it would be weird not to. I mean, if Denholm Elliott was still alive, he'd be there. Marcus.
Yeah, I just like, but why not? If you're gonna do it,
Use
like
him.
write him into the fucking story.
I agree because he's awesome, and he can definitely get Indiana shit. I agree.
That movie was too long, no
was
matter how much better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was. It was too long, and that was a scene that could have been easily excised. Nobody would have missed it.
I like seeing him, but I think you're right narratively. But the character that I wanted to, we have a comment. Rodney Dangerfield, Little Nick. Yeah, it's definitely an indie effect, but he was a treat in the movie. Okay, so Jeff, see, I get it. The character that I wanted to bring in, because I think he's absolutely irrelevant, and I love the actor. The great Scatman Crothers as Dick Halloran in The Shining, i.e. the token black character, and the only real body count, because everything else is a ghost. So basically he's a, hey doc, some shine and some don't, exposition. Then he fucking leaves 10 minutes in, and then all of a sudden he's like, he wakes up, and he's like, I gotta get to Danny and his mom at the Overlook and stuff. So he drives up there. He finally gets into the Overlook. He never sees Jack Nicholson coming. Bing! Because there's no body count in The Shining, and it's a horror film that came out in 1980. So like, we gotta act somebody that's alive.
You read the novel, yes?
I did, and I love the novel. But
and his character doesn't die in the novel, and is way more important because he's telepathically connected to
correct. So they violate all of it, but it's like you literally, if you're only going to kill one character, the token character of color, who actually seems like he knows what he's doing, and then he walks right in, is killed, never sees it coming, and he doesn't change anything. He doesn't change anything in the movie, and he's just there for a body count, because I feel like a studio was like, so who are we killing in the horror film? I mean, Jack freezes to death, but there's no body count. This was literally Kubrick trying to do a slasher. So he's like, I gotta slash somebody. And he doesn't do anything. This character, they missed the Dick Halloran potential.
Yeah, the problem was Kubrick didn't want to make a Stephen King movie. He didn't
want to make that book, that's for sure.
He wanted to make a Jack Nicholson movie. That's
right. And this is like, again, my Justin Humphreys, friend to the show as well. He and I are in total agreement on this, and I always get pushback from my nerd friends. Jack Nicholson's performance as Jack Torrance is awful. He's over the top. He's in his own movie. It's a train wreck. And the fact that people have bought into he's so bad in this film. And I just feel like I like the technical perfection of the film. I never thought it was scary, but I appreciated what Kubrick was doing. I just think Nicholson's performance is bad news bears. And then what we found out, what Kubrick did to Shelley Duvall, and no justification for that. So I have conflicting opinions, but what I'm not conflicted on is this man. It was one of our great actors, and he doesn't get to do anything, and his death doesn't mean a thing.
Yeah. Have you watched the making of that Kubrick's daughter shot?
Yeah.
He breaks your heart in his interviews. At a certain point, he just cries because he's just grateful to be involved. He was Scatman was awesome.
Scatman is awesome. He shows up in a Charlie's Angels episode where the girls go to Vegas, and Dean Martin's there. You can see the booze coming out of his pores, and Scatman has like a white cat, like at the casino, which I'm sure doesn't happen. And he's like, "Go bet on black." I'm like, "This is amazing." Anyway, so.
I'm sorry we can't ask Guy if he had any. I was going to ask where people can see him because I know he's out there doing comedy and stuff. But hopefully he'll get back to us and we can put it in the comment thread somewhere. Tess, do you have?
He wrote on the latest season of Hacks, which is now up, Hacks season 3, and I believe he's also in it as well, but I'm not positive about that. Okay. I drink a lot when I scroll through Instagram, so it's possible I misunderstood the photo. I think he's in it as well. Yeah.
Maybe. Sorry, you guys.
I agree with you. I didn't think Nicholson was good as the Joker either. I don't even like 89's Batman.
I'm gonna say that Boris Hamilton. I think she's Irish, but point taken. I don't think the Scottish and/or Irish waitress in Caddyshack really serves any point. I mean, even like her thinking she might be pregnant has no, oh, sorry, spoiler alert, has no bearing, I think, on Danny or the plot whatsoever. So
that is true. But if you look into the actress's story, whoa, that's interesting. It's a crazy story. Tess, what about you? Anything to people you want people to see?
You can always go to Amazon and buy one of my books. My Cat Kelly Mystery series. There's 5 books up online right now. And that's on Amazon. And if you want to see more of me, you can go to my Substack, tessrafferty.substack.com. That's awesome. I think that's my stuff right now.
Tracy, anything you want to plug?
Post-production on World Breaker, hoping that the town opens up so we can start taking things out in the TV space in June. And I'm working on some chapters we got a sequel to our Giant Beast Cinema that we're working on, so I'll be doing another book on that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll just say, hey, it'd be great if someone could cast me in something so I can stop driving a fucking Lyft. That said, I will plug next week's show. It's another movie I can't believe we haven't gotten to until now. A horror writer, Seth Sherwood, is back on the show to talk about Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive.
Oh my God.
Where he promised to scare the hell out of you.
This is like fact. Like, Stephen King has given interviews admitting he was so high on cocaine he doesn't remember directing the movie. Doesn't remember any. It is a great soundtrack. It's totally bonkers. It's only in the 80s with it. Again, to Tessa's point when we started the show, cocaine. #cocaine.
Because cocaine.
#cocaine.
That should be we'll give those t-shirts away on Patreon. When you follow us, we'll have just Because Cocaine t-shirts.
Yeah.
That was always my dream. 4 years later, I have yet to make a t-shirt, but
beyond that, we'll talk to some of our talented people.
Because Cocaine, we'll give it that swirly 70s writing, the kind where it's all round and used to see it like at roller rinks and stuff. Yeah, Because Cocaine.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Guy, for joining. Thank you, Tess, for coming back to it more. Definitely a walk down memory lane.
All right. Thank you guys so much for having me.
All right.
Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.
See you next week.
Bye.